I'll start with the moment I knew this job could destroy me. I was standing outside a glass office overlooking San Diego Bay when the woman behind that door, my CEO, said calmly, "If you stay close to me, you will lose something you can't afford." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten me. She just stated a fact, the way doctors do when they're done pretending there's hope. I remember thinking that normal people would have thanked her and walked away. I didn't. And that decision is where everything began. My name is Daniel Ward. I was 28 then, exhausted in a way sleep doesn't fix. A month earlier, I'd been laid off from a small electronics repair service in Arizona, the kind of place that disappears quietly when the economy sneezes. Back home, my mother was fighting a diagnosis that turned every phone call into a calculation. Tests, medication, insurance gaps. Money wasn't comfort or ambition to me anymore. It was oxygen. When a recruiter mentioned a personal assistant role to a CEO in California, I didn't hear the warnings in his voice. I heard steady paycheck. Ashland Dynamics wasn't a startup with beanbags and smiles. It was steel and glass, policies written in language that assumed people were replaceable. Hannah Ashland ran it at 33. Business magazines called her a visionary. Employees used a different word when they thought no one was listening. I didn't know any of that when I walked into her office on my first day. I just saw a woman reading my resume as if it were a contract she was deciding whether to sign or burn. She looked up and studied me longer than was polite. Then she said, "Most people don't last a week here. Not because they're incompetent. Because they expect this place to care about them." She paused, letting that land. "If you stay near me, you'll eventually have to choose between this job and the rest of your life. If you want safety, you should leave now." I could hear my heart beating in my ears. Part of me wanted to tell her I wasn't afraid. That would have been a lie. I was afraid of everything, being broke again, being useless to my family, being 30 with nothing to show for it. So I said the only honest thing I had. I said, "I understand." And somehow, that was enough for her to nod and dismiss me. What she added as I reached the door is what stayed with me. "I don't fire people quickly," she said. "I let them get used to being needed first." I walked out knowing I'd just stepped onto ground that looked solid only because no one had tested it recently. That first week, I told myself I was just learning the rhythms. Early mornings, late nights, precise instructions delivered without emotion. Hannah didn't yell. She didn't praise. She watched. Every mistake felt recorded somewhere I couldn't see. Still, I stayed. Not because I felt special, and not because I believed I could change her. I stayed because leaving would have meant admitting that fear was still running my life. Here's the truth I hadn't said out loud yet, and maybe you'll understand it better than I did then. When you've spent long enough scrambling to survive, a warning doesn't sound like danger. It sounds like honesty. And honesty feels safer than hope. The problem is that safety built on fear is still a trap. I didn't know that yet. All I knew, as I rode the elevator down that first night, was that I hadn't walked away, and whatever price that decision carried, I had just agreed to pay it later. I understood how dangerous this job was on a Tuesday morning, in a conference room filled with people who never learned my name. The air was calm, professional, almost polite, which made what happened worse. Silence, when it comes from power, is never empty. It is deliberate. By my second week at Ashland Dynamics, my days had settled into a brutal rhythm. Early arrivals, late departures, calendars stacked so tightly they looked like walls. Hannah Ashland spoke little, and when she did, every word felt weighed. She didn't explain herself or soften instructions. She assumed competence and punished hesitation. I told myself this was normal at the executive level. That pressure was proof I belonged closer to the center. The investor meeting was supposed to be routine. Updated forecasts. A discussion about costs. I had checked the numbers twice the night before and once again that morning. Still, halfway through the presentation, one figure on the screen didn't match the printed reports. It was a small variance. Manageable. The kind of thing teams fix quietly all the time. An investor cleared his throat. Which number is correct? Hannah didn't rush to answer. She examined the screen as if she were seeing it for the first time, then looked down at the papers. Finally, she said calmly, "That discrepancy came from my assistant." That was it. No accusation. No defense. Just a clean sentence, released into the room. Every face turned toward me. I corrected the number, explained the update, and the meeting moved on. But something stayed broken. When it ended, no one spoke to me. No small talk. No reassurance. In their eyes, I wasn't new. I was already temporary. Back at my desk, I waited for Hannah to say something. Anything. She didn't. Instead, she sent 3 new tasks and closed her door. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother about another appointment, another bill we hadn't planned for. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. I realized then that I had a choice, even if it felt invisible. I could protect myself, stay quiet, stay replaceable, or I could keep leaning in, knowing exactly how exposed that made me. Around 11 that night, I brought Hannah the documents she needed for the morning. Her office lights were dim, the city glowing behind her. She looked different then. Not powerful, just tired. I noticed the medical tracker on her wrist, her hand pressing briefly against her chest. I set the folder down and added a thermos of tea. "It's ginger," I said. "For long nights." She looked at it, then at me. "You don't need to stay past your hours," she said. "This isn't your responsibility." That should have been my exit. Instead, I nodded and left unsettled. What disturbed me most was not that she had let me take the fall, but that she had done it without malice. It meant this wasn't personal. It was structural. If pressure increased, someone like me would always absorb it first. That realization followed me home, into the quiet apartment I barely furnished, into a night of shallow sleep broken by numbers and unfinished conversations. The next few days tested me in smaller ways. Meetings scheduled without notice. Deadlines moved forward without explanation. Once, I corrected an error in a report before it went out, and Hannah acknowledged it with a nod so subtle I wondered if I imagined it. I began to understand the rules. She rewarded competence with silence and punished mistakes with distance. Emotion never entered the equation. I told myself to treat it like a contract, nothing more. Do the work. Take the check. Don't read meaning into moments. But something kept pulling my attention back to her, not with attraction, but with a quiet question. How does someone live like this without breaking? One evening, after everyone else had gone, I passed her office again. The door was open just enough to see her sitting still, the city reflected in the glass. For a second, she looked like someone waiting for something that wasn't coming. When she noticed me, the mask returned instantly. "Go home, Daniel," she said, using my name for the first time. I stopped in the hallway, unsure why that single word mattered so much. I could go. I should go. Or I could stay exactly where I was, knowing that every extra minute near her came with a cost no one spelled out. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the meeting, the silence, the way she'd chosen efficiency over protection. By morning, one truth had settled in. If I stayed, I couldn't pretend anymore. Whatever this was, it wasn't safe. And the next time I chose to remain, it would no longer be by accident. When I arrived early the next day, the building was quiet, almost peaceful. I stood by the windows and asked myself a question I hadn't wanted to face. Was I staying because I believed in the work, or because leaving felt like another failure I couldn't afford? The answer mattered more than I liked. Hannah walked past without stopping, already focused, already armored. She didn't know what decision I was circling. She didn't know that in her silence, she had forced me to choose. I followed her to the conference room, carrying my notebook, aware that something inside me had shifted. I was no longer waiting to see how this would end. I was deciding whether I was willing to be here when it did. That morning, I didn't feel brave or loyal. I felt awake. And I knew that whatever happened next, I would remember this as the moment I stopped drifting and started choosing, even if the choice carried consequences I wasn't ready to name yet. The risk was no longer abstract. It was personal, present, and waiting for my next step in a place that never forgave hesitation. If you want to know what corporate pressure feels like, picture a room where everyone smiles while they decide who gets cut. No shouting. No drama. Just polite voices and a spreadsheet that quietly turns people into numbers. That was my third week at Ashland Dynamics. And that was the week I started seeing the trap from the inside. I'm Daniel Ward, 28, still pretending I belonged in glass hallways and conference calls. Back in Arizona, my mom's health didn't care about titles. It cared about payments. Each morning, I checked my bank app before I checked my email, because the balance told me whether I could breathe. In San Diego, I told myself this job was a bridge. All I had to do was keep my footing. Hannah Ashland made that harder without even trying. She moved through the company like she owned the air. In meetings, she was calm, surgical, never wasting a sentence. People leaned toward her when she spoke, like gravity had shifted. And yet, the closer I got, the more I noticed what she avoided. Personal talk, celebrations, anything that looked like attachment. It wasn't coldness for sport. It was strategy. The quarter-end report was coming, and the building changed as it approached. HR started using softer words, optimization, realignment, streamlining. But their eyes were sharper. Managers stopped scheduling lunches. Teams stayed late, not because they were inspired, but because they were afraid to be seen leaving first. Somewhere in that churn, my name sat on a list I couldn't access. I learned that because Mitchell Carver decided I should. He was a senior partner on the board, the kind of man who wore kindness like a tailor jacket. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He had that look that says, I can end you without touching you. He caught me outside the main conference room after a strategy session and asked, You're the new assistant, right? He didn't wait for my answer. Let me give you advice. People who stand too close to Hannah tend to fall when she's pushed. I tried to keep my face neutral. I'm here to do my job. Mitchell smiled, almost amused. Good. Then understand this. When the board needs a sacrifice, she won't save you. She'll make it look clean, like she never knew your name. He leaned in just slightly. Don't confuse proximity with protection. I walked away with my stomach tight, angry that his words landed because part of me believed them. That afternoon, I watched Hannah in another meeting, watched her hold the room with a steady voice, and wondered if she'd ever held anyone the same way. The thought made me feel disloyal and also stupid. 2 days later, I saw Mitchell in Hannah's office. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose. I was delivering a folder, the kind of boring task that keeps the machine running. The door was half open. I heard his voice before I saw him. Hannah, you have to learn to let people go, he said, calm as a weather report. Even the ones who think they'd die for this company. Especially your assistant. Then I stepped in, and the air changed. Mitchell turned toward me, as if I'd been invited. Hannah's eyes flicked to mine, quick and unreadable. Mitchell stood, smoothing his suit. Dan, you're right, he said, proving his point by remembering my name only when it suited him. Good luck. This place is educational. When he left, Hannah didn't sit. She stayed by the window, looking out at the bay like the water could offer an answer. He's not wrong, she said finally. The board wants cuts. They want obedience. And they'll start with the people closest to me. I swallowed. Are you telling me to leave? I'm telling you the truth. Her voice stayed level, but there was something raw underneath it, like a cable pulled too tight. If you keep standing next to me, I won't be able to protect you. If you want a safe paycheck, transfer now. Find a department that won't be dragged into this. There it was, my internal choice, laid out in plain language. Safety for my family, or loyalty to a woman who hadn't asked for it and might not deserve it. I went back to my desk and stared at the internal job portal for a long time. Finance had openings. Operations. Roles that would keep me invisible. My fingers hovered over the apply button like it was a life raft. Then I pictured my mother's text messages, the polite fear she tried to hide. I pictured the look in Hannah's eyes when she said truth, like she was allergic to comfort. And I pictured Mitchell's smile, the kind that enjoys watching people run. I made a decision that wasn't romantic. It was stubborn. I filed for an internal transfer into Hannah's transformation unit. Same orbit, different title. A technical move that told the board I was reassigned, while telling Hannah I wasn't going anywhere. By evening, Mitchell had already seen the update. He passed me in the corridor and paused, just long enough to make my skin go cold. "I see you don't understand hints," he said softly. "Or maybe you do, and you're choosing to be a lesson." Hannah called me into her office an hour later. She didn't ask why I'd done it. She just looked at the HR confirmation on her screen and said, "Do you understand what you've signaled?" When I nodded, she lowered her voice. "They will come for you first now. They'll audit your time, your emails, your mistakes. One crack and Mitchell will use it." She held my gaze a beat longer than usual. "If you regret this, tell me today. I won't think less of you." I said, "I don't regret it." She whispered, "Then don't give them a reason," once. After he walked away, my phone buzzed with another message from home, another bill, another appointment. I stared at it, then at the dark glass of Hannah's office door. For the first time, staying didn't feel like courage. It felt like stepping onto a track right before the train arrives. And the worst part was this. I wasn't sure whether Hannah would pull me off it or simply watch to see if I survived. That email hit my inbox at 6:12 a.m., and for a full minute I just stared at it like it might blink first. You ever notice how one short line can feel heavier than a whole conversation? In that moment, I wasn't thinking about corporate structure or career strategy. I was thinking about my mom in Arizona, the pharmacy receipt folded in her purse, and how fast a stable paycheck can turn into a story you tell later. After my internal move into Hannah's transformation unit, the building didn't get louder. It got quieter. People stopped joking when I walked past. Meetings ended a little faster. Doors closed a little sooner. And Hannah turned professional in a way that felt personal. She stopped calling me into her office. Instead, tasks came through the corporate chat. Short bullets, no context, no eye contact. When I did see her, it was at a distance. Her back as she entered conference room, her profile in an elevator, her voice on speakerphone. If you've ever been iced out by someone you're trying to support, you know the confusion. It's not anger that hurts. It's the feeling that you misread the whole map. By Wednesday, I was running on caffeine and stubbornness. I'd been sleeping 4 hours a night, then waking to check my phone for updates from home. My mother tried to sound upbeat, but I could hear the strain in the commas. "We'll manage," she'd write. "Don't worry." And I'd think, worry is all I have right now. That morning, the confirm your transfer email made the choice real again. If I clicked yes, I stayed tied to Hannah, tied to scrutiny, audits, and Mitchell's quiet smile. If I clicked no, I could still back out, slide into a safer department, keep my head down. No heroics. No lessons. Just survival. I opened the internal job portal anyway. Not to apply. At least that's what I told myself. Finance had a coordinator role. Operations had an assistant manager track. Both came with normal hours and less exposure. I hovered over the apply button until my finger cramped. Then my phone rang. Arizona area code. "Danny," my mom said, trying to sound like herself. "How's California?" I lied and said, "Busy but good." She paused. "Your aunt offered to help again." I told her no. But I might have to say yes next month. That hit me harder than any boardroom threat. Because it wasn't just money. It was dignity. My mother was proud in the way older women can be proud, quiet, stubborn, determined not to become a burden. I promised her we'd be fine. I promised her I'd handle it. And when I hung up, my hand was shaking. An hour later, I passed the executive gym and heard the steady thud of a treadmill. The office was mostly empty. Late evening had bled into early morning for half the company, and the rest were still at home. Curiosity pulled me closer than it should have. Through the glass, I saw Hannah. No heels. No blazer. Just a plain t-shirt, hair pulled back, running at a stubborn, controlled pace. She gripped the side rails like they were the only thing keeping her upright. Her face wasn't angry. It was concentrated, like pain had become a schedule item. I should have kept walking. Instead, I stepped inside and kept my distance, hands in my pockets, so I wouldn't look like I was reaching for anything. "Do you ever stop?" I asked. My voice came out softer than I meant. She didn't look at me. "You're not scheduled to be here," she said, breathing hard. "I'm not here to talk about schedules." I surprised myself with that. Then I added, "Do you ever do anything that isn't for the company?" The treadmill kept moving, but her shoulders tightened. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she hit the stop button and stood there, catching her breath, staring at the wall like it owed her an apology. 2 years ago, she said finally, still not looking at me, I survived an accident that took my co-founder and my fiancée. Same night, same car. I'd seen the old article. I hadn't expected to hear it from her mouth. After that, she continued, everyone who got close thought they were the solution. They wanted to fix me, manage me, save me. She let out a small, humorless laugh. Then they got tired, or scared, or offended when I didn't become grateful enough. I swallowed. So you pushed them away first. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, defensive. I keep the company alive. That's what I do. And what do you keep yourself alive for? The question was out before I could stop it. Silence sat between us. Not the meeting room silence. The kind that makes you hear your own breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. Control is the only thing the crash didn't take. She glanced at my badge like she was reading my position the way she'd read my resume. If you stay near me, you'll be caught in the same blast radius. Mitchell will use you to prove a point. And I won't. I won't be able to soften it. There was the emotional shift right there. Not warmth, not romance, truth. And in that truth was a strange kind of respect. I looked down at my phone. The email was still open. Confirm your transfer. My internal choice wasn't about bravery anymore. It was about whether I could live with the kind of person I'd become if I walked away, now, quietly, safely, leaving her alone with the knives. I was about to back out, I admitted. I even opened the portal. She nodded once, like she'd expected it. That would be smart. I don't want smart, I said. I want honest. For the first time, her expression changed, not softened, just exposed. A crack in the armor that lasted half a second. Go home, Daniel, she said, but it didn't sound like a command. It sounded like a test. I didn't move. I'll go, I replied, but I'm confirming the transfer. Her jaw tightened, and she looked past me toward the dark windows. Then understand this, she said quietly. The next time you take a hit for being near me, I won't lie to make you feel better. I nodded. Don't. Just don't pretend you didn't know my name. When I walked out, my thumb hovered over the button. Confirm. One tap to lock my future to a woman who didn't promise anything. I tapped it. My phone buzzed again, another bill, and I didn't check it. For once, I let the fear wait until morning. And in the elevator, as the doors closed, I realized the scariest part wasn't getting fired. The scariest part was that I'd chosen this with my eyes open. The first sound I heard that morning wasn't Hannah's voice. It was the printer in the hallway spitting out a stack of layoff packets, one after another, like the building had decided people were paperwork now. I stood there with my coffee going cold, watching pages slide into a tray, and I thought this is how it happens. Not with sirens, with staples. By the time the executive briefing started, everyone already knew what the numbers wanted. The quarter had landed hard. The stock had dipped. The board wanted a clean story for investors, decisive leadership, streamlined operations, right-sizing. HR had the list ready. Finance had the savings mapped. All that was left was a signature. I sat at the far end of the table with my notebook open, pretending I was just an assistant. But you can feel when a room has a target, and that day I could feel too. Hannah, for refusing to bend, and me, for standing close enough to make it personal. Mitchell Carver arrived 5 minutes early, calm as ever. He nodded at me like we were colleagues. That was his gift, making pressure look like courtesy. When Hannah walked in, the air shifted. She didn't look tired. She looked prepared. No extra warmth, no extra cold. Just control. They went through the agenda. Risk, projections, talking points. Then Mitchell slid a folder across the table. This is the reduction plan, he said. We can present it as compassionate. Severance, career support, the usual. Hannah opened the folder, flipped through the pages, and stopped at the list. Her eyes didn't move fast. She read every line like it mattered. Then she closed it. No, she said. A few people blinked like they hadn't heard her. Mitchell kept his expression neutral. No. I'm not signing a plan where human beings are rows and excel, Hannah said. Her voice was steady, not dramatic. If the board believes this is weakness, write my exit. But I won't do this to the team that carried us through the last year. The room went silent in that careful, corporate way where no one wants to be the first to pick a side. I felt my pulse in my wrists. Across the table, Mitchell finally smiled, small and sharp. That's a bold stance, he said. And bold stances have consequences. Hannah didn't flinch. So do cowardly ones. After the meeting broke, people scattered fast. No one wanted to be seen lingering near the blast zone. Hannah walked out without looking back. I followed at a distance, unsure if I was allowed to speak. My phone buzzed Arizona again, and I ignored it. Not because I didn't care. Because I couldn't carry two crises at once. She took the stairs to the roof. The door clicked shut behind us, and the wind hit like a slap. Below, the city moved like nothing had changed. Up there, everything had. Hannah leaned on the railing and stared out over the bay. They'll strip my authority first, she said. Then they'll blame me for the drop. Then they'll replace me with someone who signs faster. I waited, because she was the kind of person who said the hardest part last. She turned to me. Daniel, if you stay with me through this, you could lose your job anyway. Not because I want it. Because the board will want a lesson. And you're convenient. Her jaw tightened. If I'm just your employer, find a safer harbor now. That was the choice, laid out clean. Safety for my mother. A paycheck that keeps medicine on the table. Or a woman who offered no guarantees and no comfort, only truth. I looked at her and tried to answer like the man I used to be, careful, practical, invisible. But I couldn't. Something in me had shifted over these weeks. Not into fantasy. Into a stubborn kind of respect. I came here for money, I said. I won't pretend I didn't. I needed the check. I swallowed. But I've spent my whole life walking away from hard things because it was safer. And every time I did, I lost a little more of myself. I don't want to be the kind of man who disappears the moment the storm starts. Hannah's eyes held mine, and for a second the armor wasn't gone, but it wasn't everything. So what are you saying? She asked. I'm saying I'm staying, I replied. Not because you're a CEO. Because you're alone in this. And I know what it feels like to be left behind by people who promised they wouldn't. The wind tugged at her hair. She let out a breath like she'd been holding it for years. Then one condition, she said quietly. No heroics. We don't play savior. We tell the truth, even when it's ugly. And if it becomes too much, we say it out loud before we break. I nodded. Deal. On my way back down, Mitchell caught me near the elevators. He didn't block my path. He didn't have to. Loyalty looks noble from the outside, he said. Inside, it's just bad risk. He nodded toward Hannah's floor. If you want to keep feeding your family, I can arrange a transfer that survives whatever happens to her. Quiet. Clean. For a second, I tasted relief. Then I saw what he was really offering. Permission to abandon someone the moment it got hard. I handed him my badge for scanning and said, I'll take my chances. My phone buzzed Arizona, and I let it ring, not from coldness, but because I'd already chosen my fear. That afternoon, I finally called my mother back. I told her work was uncertain. I told her I might have to tighten everything. She was quiet. Then she said, I'm proud of you for being honest. And that almost broke me more than any threat. That night, Hannah and I sat in a small rented office she'd quietly secured for a consulting project. Nothing flashy, just a table, 2 chairs, cheap coffee, and a laptop that hummed like a tired engine. No promises. No speeches. Just the decision to show up again tomorrow. If you're waiting for a fairy tale ending, this isn't it. I don't know if I'll still have this job in a month. I don't know if the board will make me the example. I only know this. For the first time, I chose the hard road on purpose. And as I locked the door and heard the city outside, one thought stayed with me like a bruise. What if next time, staying costs more than I can pay?